Jelly Roll has filed for divorce from his wife, Bunny XO, after nearly 10 years of marriage. Reports are that the decision was mutual. It's a private family matter.
There are love stories that fans don't just admire, they hold on to them. They point to them and say, see, it can happen, even for the broken ones, even for the ones who started with nothing. For almost a decade, Jelly Roll and Bunny XO were that story. A van-dwelling rapper from Nashville and a working girl from Las Vegas, two people the world insisted didn't belong together, building a life so loud and so public that millions of strangers felt like they had a stake in it. So when the news broke in the middle of June 2026 that the marriage was already legally over, it didn't just surprise people. It rearranged something. It made an entire audience ask the same question at once: what actually happened to the couple they thought was unbreakable? The court paperwork itself is plain, almost cold, the way legal documents always are. Jelly Roll, whose legal name is Jason Bradley DeFord, filed for divorce from Bunny XO, legally Alisa DeFord, in Williamson County, Tennessee, on May 18. The filing cited irreconcilable differences and listed the date of separation as May 9. There were no children from the marriage itself, though the two of them had spent 9 years raising Jelly Roll's son and daughter from previous relationships together. TMZ broke the story first, and within hours every major outlet from CNN to NBC to Rolling Stone had picked it up, each one running some version of the same disbelieving headline. The people close to the couple offered almost nothing beyond a single phrase, repeated so often it started to sound rehearsed: a mutual decision, a private family matter. What makes the timing so jarring is how recently the two of them had been telling a completely different story in public. In February, at the Grammy Awards, they were photographed holding each other on the red carpet, visibly affectionate, and when Jelly Roll won Best Contemporary Country Album for Beautifully Broken, he thanked her from the stage. That same month, Bunny released her memoir, Stripped Down, Unfiltered and Unapologetic, and in interviews promoting it she sounded like a woman describing the best chapter of her life. She told one outlet that after years of working toward goals they used to only dream about, they were finally in what she called their excitement phase. She talked about a 5-year plan the two of them had sketched out on their very first night together back in 2016, and how, a decade later, pieces of it were actually starting to come true. Most strikingly, she confirmed that they had selected a surrogate and were hoping to welcome twins, using her eggs and his, the family they had wanted for years and had struggled for just as long to build. 3 months after that interview, he filed for divorce. To understand how a marriage gets from a Grammy red carpet to a courthouse filing in the space of 3 months, you have to go back to where it started, because almost nothing about this relationship ever followed an ordinary script. They met in 2015, before he was famous, when he was still playing small rooms and living out of a van. Bunny was in Las Vegas working as an escort and happened to be in the room that night with someone else entirely. By his own account, given years later, nothing about the two of them made sense on paper. He's joked publicly that she wasn't his type, that he was nowhere near hers, that an outside observer would never have paired them. But a friendship formed first, slow and unglamorous, built on phone calls where he'd ask her advice about raising his daughter and she'd actually sit with him through it. That friendship became something neither of them could keep pretending wasn't happening, and in August 2016, the two of them got married in a Las Vegas chapel, broke and unbothered by it, betting everything on each other with almost nothing in their pockets. The early years were not gentle. Just days before the wedding, Jelly Roll had welcomed a son with another woman, and Bunny walked directly into that complicated, difficult situation rather than away from it, eventually helping him fight for custody of his daughter, whose mother was struggling with addiction at the time. She got sober for the sake of those kids. She helped build a household out of almost nothing, on a tight budget, while he tried to turn music into something more than a side hustle. It is, by any measure, an enormous amount of weight for a brand new marriage to carry, and only 2 years in, it nearly collapsed under it. In 2018, Bunny learned that her husband had been unfaithful. This wasn't something he addressed publicly for years, but when he finally did, in 2025, he didn't soften it. On a podcast appearance, he said plainly that having an affair on his wife was one of the worst moments of his entire adult life, and that even while it was happening, he knew he was still in love with her. He didn't blame the people around him by name, but he did describe being surrounded at the time by people whose own lives were chaotic, people cheating, people using drugs, and admitted that he had let himself become a reflection of that environment instead of standing apart from it. Bunny, for her part, has said she was devastated, that she genuinely believed he was different, and that in the aftermath she found herself asking a harder question about her own patterns rather than only being angry at him. She moved back to Las Vegas. By any reasonable measure, the marriage was over. It didn't stay over. The two of them eventually found their way back to each other, though Bunny has been honest that trust doesn't return on command just because two people want it to. She said it took years before she fully believed he loved her again, years before she stopped feeling disposable, like someone who could simply be replaced. In a 2024 video, she referred back to that period directly, noting that the two of them had broken up in 2018, that she'd moved back to Vegas, and that he had come to get her back, and that everything that followed, all the growth, all the milestones, had been built on top of that reconciliation. In February of this year, talking about the same chapter, she reframed it in stronger terms still, saying that as wrong as the affair was, she was almost grateful it happened, because it forced both of them to learn what it actually means to choose another person, not just on the easy days, but especially on the days you don't feel like it. While they were repairing the relationship privately, both of their public lives were transforming at a pace almost nobody could have predicted. Bunny built her Dumb Blonde podcast into a genuine media business, pulling in massive monthly downloads and climbing to the top of the comedy charts, becoming a recognizable name and voice independent of her husband's career. Jelly Roll, meanwhile, went from playing rooms of 20 people to selling out arenas, racking up chart-topping singles and major award wins, eventually losing close to 300 pounds along the way and crediting her, repeatedly and publicly, with helping save his life. In 2023, the two of them went back to the same Las Vegas chapel where they first married and renewed their vows, with Bunny calling herself the luckiest woman alive that night. It looked, from the outside, like a complete redemption arc, for him, for them, for the relationship itself. But success on that scale puts its own kind of pressure on a marriage, especially one that had already survived a near collapse. He was on the road constantly. She was running a growing company of her own. And underneath the public wins, the two of them were also fighting a quieter, more private battle, trying to have a child together. Bunny has spoken about blocked tubes, about losses, about being pushed into medically induced menopause after a severe reaction to fertility treatment. In 2024, the two of them went public about pursuing IVF, saying on social media that something had shifted and that they wanted, for the first time, to bring a child that was unmistakably theirs into the family alongside the two kids they were already raising. By her February memoir, that journey had reached its most hopeful point yet, a surrogate selected, twins hoped for, the dream they'd whispered about on their very first night together finally within reach. And then, within months, it ended in a courtroom filing instead of a delivery room. Bunny has offered some of the most direct insight into why, even if neither of them has pointed to one single, clean cause. In a February interview, before the divorce was public, she talked candidly about self-worth being at the center of a lot of their struggles, his and hers both. She said he had carried real doubt that any woman could love him for who he actually was rather than trying to change him, and that she, in turn, had brought significant baggage of her own into the relationship from the start. She described coming out of an abusive relationship before meeting him, and watching her own father cheat when she was a child, which left her skeptical of traditional marriage long before she ever stood in a chapel herself. She's also been open, more than once, about the fact that she and Jelly Roll never modeled their relationship on conventional rules in the first place. She's described their bond as something closer to free than open, shaped by two people, a former escort and a former street hustler, as she's put it, who simply didn't come to love each other the way people raised inside more traditional households do. 4 years, she framed that difference as the secret to their survival. It's possible, in the end, that it became something harder to sustain instead. There were warning signs in the weeks before the news broke, though almost none of them were obvious in the moment. In early June, Jelly Roll performed at one of the largest country festivals of the year, and people in the crowd later noticed he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. Around the same time, Bunny continued posting as she always had, confident, glowing, seemingly unshaken, which fans who follow her closely have noted is exactly how she tends to carry herself in private pain rather than public collapse. Reports also indicate the couple brought in a well-regarded Nashville divorce attorney well before any of this became public, suggesting the decision wasn't sudden, but something carried quietly for a stretch of time before either of them said a word. In the days since the filing became public, both of them have started speaking, carefully, in their own ways. Jelly Roll has thrown himself back into touring through the summer. Bunny has been open on her own podcast, telling listeners that she and Jelly Roll are ending the marriage on the best possible terms they can manage, and confirming, notably, that despite the divorce, their plans for the surrogate pregnancy are still moving forward, that they are, in her words, still having a baby together. His 18-year-old daughter, Bailey, addressed the public fascination with the split directly on social media, writing that she found it unsettling how invested strangers had become in what she called a clearly private family matter. So if there is an answer to why, at 41, with a Grammy win behind him and twins on the way, Jelly Roll chose to end his marriage to the woman he is credited with saving his life, it isn't a single confession delivered in one dramatic interview. It's scattered across years of things both of them have already said out loud, about an affair he never fully forgave himself for, about self-worth neither of them had fully built before they met each other, about a version of marriage they always knew didn't look like anyone else's, and about two people whose lives, for all their love, eventually grew so large and so separate that staying married may have stopped meaning the same thing it once did. They are still raising children together. They are, by their own account, still becoming parents together. What they are no longer doing is being married, and for two people who built their entire story on defying what was supposed to make sense, maybe that, too, is simply them choosing the ending that was honest instead of the one that looked good from the outside.